Hello, Lisa here. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if this is your first time stopping by. Today we're going to be doing a July, like my monthly deck reviews. But before we get into everything, first off, hello, I'm Lisa. Welcome to my channel. If you're new here, I am a tarot deck creator, a content creator here on YouTube, obviously. If you're interested in my other work, I will throw a graphic up where you can see what is currently available in my Etsy shop, as well as a graphic showing my current Kickstarter campaign sort of cover image, so you can see that I do have a Kickstarter campaign currently funding. I think at the time you're seeing this, you still have a little bit of time left if you want to get in on the Unicorn's Journey Oracle deck, but not to worry if you missed it, because there will be an opportunity to have a late pledge option. So just keep an eye on the campaign. Make sure you sign up for my newsletter. There's a link for my newsletter, by the way, in the link tree down below. And I do try to put out one newsletter a month, and I am never going to spam you because I don't tend to write a lot of newsletters. I feel like I make so much content that newsletters definitely are something that I do my best with, but I do tend to do a bit of a monthly roundup of everything I've been up to, everything going on. It is the place where I tend to remember to mention things like any events I might be attending or what's going on with my projects. I do tend to give sneak peeks of some of the project artwork, things like that. It's totally free, obviously, so if you are interested in connecting with me over there, there is a link to sign up for my newsletter in my link tree link in my description box down below. But I think that's it for all the announcement-y things. Let's just jump into it. So I'm sure this is going to come as like a humongous shock to you guys, but like throughout all of July, as I prepared for the Unicorn's Journey Oracle launch, I literally just worked with Unicorn's Journey Tarot and Unicorn's Journey Oracle for myself. And this is also what I used exclusively in our member readings for Magical Unicorns and Up in July. Funny enough, what I actually worked with most of July is my very first prototypes from both decks, and then I'll show these. So this was such nostalgia. So I had a personal little, I wouldn't call this a prototype. I created for myself a basic sample of Unicorn's Journey Oracle at Make Playing Cards, which is not quite to snuff quality-wise what I would want or anything like that, but it's a great chance to get a physical copy in my hands and work with the deck and read with the deck and practice and check things. And it's different no matter how many times I look at the digital files. I will always catch things once I have a physical copy in hand, no matter where it's printed from. And that was definitely the case here. But anyway, so I ordered myself a little sample for Make Playing Cards of my own Unicorn's Journey Oracle. Back when I was creating the tarot, I did the same thing, and I even got this little custom tin. And I ordered this print sample from Make Playing Cards for Unicorn's Journey Tarot too. And there was something so nostalgic and just cozy feeling about working with these. The reason I wanted to pair these two specifically is because the Make Playing Cards cardstock obviously feels the same between both decks, and the physical size and the corner rounding and everything matches. So I know that sounds probably really silly, but I didn't want to match like a Make Playing Cards printed, like this one even had some flaws on it. Make Playing Cards totally bunged up and like ripped the paper on some of them. I'm sure they didn't realize. I didn't complain or anything. It's whatever. But the point is that they are a little bit smaller, and then the corner rounding like matches, because I didn't want to work with this version, the Make Playing Cards version of the Oracle, next to like the production version of Unicorn's Journey Tarot, because then it didn't like match. I know that makes me sound really persnickety, and I am persnickety. Let's be real for a second. I am totally picky about things like this. So it just, but anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself. There was something super cozy about pulling out this super beat up copy of Unicorn's Journey Tarot, because I used the heck out of this specific copy of the tarot for months before I was ready to go to Kickstarter with this deck. Unicorn's Journey Oracle, I still use the heck out of this, but it's not quite as beat up as my tarot. But putting these two together, I literally just stuffed them together in a bag and carried these around. And this is, again, what I worked with for my member readings. And it was super great. So this is what I used for, I would say, about half of July, maybe a little less than half. But I was doing readings for myself every day with both decks. And I was just sort of like, I was just having a blast, just playing with them. And then of course, identifying things like this is an example. These are the older versions of these two cards, Bloom and Fear. And this is how I had them originally designed to be. So it was kind of like profile of this unicorn. And then like, I don't need to get into all this right now, but I wanted their little bums and tails in the images. So when I did a prototype through my printer, I actually readjusted it. So we get this entire unicorn in the card, and we get this entire unicorn in the card. Why am I doing that? Look at me, I'm already discombobulated. Yeah. Anyway, but I obviously had a great time using these. And also, I don't always give myself permission to use, like, I don't know how to say this, to use my own stuff. And having a month where for myself and my own readings, I only used these decks was the most cozy thing ever, and was exactly what I needed for a month where I was pretty nervous. I always get very anxious leading up to a Kickstarter launch. I know I don't need to be anxious, but I'm just wired that way, I guess. And just want to make sure people like it and all this kind of thing. But anyway, so I found it so comforting to just read with my own decks. And I do find that whenever I need a quick little reading for myself, I keep the mini of UJT in my purse, in my big bag that I carry around with me, and I tend to reach for that whenever I need a quickie little like message. And there's just something special about working with my own decks. And it was a good reminder that like I'm allowed to work with my own stuff. I think part of it is that I always want to be sharing with you guys other people's work. And I as a result, I tend to gear my practice around other people's work. And then I forget to like make as much time as I want to for my own. But I do reach for my things. I don't know. I don't know. I think part of this is that I feel mildly self-conscious that like the main decks I worked with in July were my own, but it's true. And then when I got the prototype in for Unicorn's Journey Oracle, I was working with these two production copies together. So I have my nicer version, obviously, of the UJT here. And then I have my nice print version of the UJ Oracle here. And this one's still a prototype. This one is a final production copy, but still, look at the edges next to each other. Oh, they're like a little deck family. Look at them. We have the star. And a lot of people, this is just like a fun little Easter egg I'll share with you in case you didn't know this. These are actually, I know they look very cloud-like, and that's intentional, but they are actually, if you look at the lilac grove that Mystic makes their home, and this home happens and becomes solidified throughout the Unicorn's Journey Tarot storyline, but these fluffy pink things are actually these lilac flowers. It's like a lilac flowers, like it's magical, but the flowers are always in full bloom, and these trees are always in full bloom. They always have these like big cotton candy like lilac flowers, and it's meant to be sort of storytale-y and fairy tale book like. But the idea is that you're lying on your back looking up at the sky. And so when you're lying on your back in Mystic's Grove, you're looking up through a clearing in those lilac trees, and you see the night sky and you see Mystic's special star. And then in the Oracle deck, it's the same idea, only it's daytime. And you're looking up through, and between the lilac trees and all their flowers, you see the clouds, and you of course see the sun, and it's just a whole thing. Anyway, obviously in these versions, the colors are much richer, and there's nothing like the print quality that I get from these production versions of the decks. And they aren't the same as Make Playing Cards. Make Playing Cards has a different print technology that they use, and that print technology tends to be a little bit paler or lighter, less saturated, I guess. But anyways, so when I flipped over to working with these copies, I was thrilled because, of course, once again, they match aesthetically. They are the same size and cardstock and finish, and everything's matchy-matchy. But yeah, anyway. So yes, this is what I used. This is what I used in all of July, pretty much. And the only difference was that I switched from those Make Playing Cards prototypes to these actual boxed versions of the deck. But I am babbling. So usually I have a few pairings to share, like I said, for the decks that I've been working with throughout the month. But this time, just these babies. That's it. My own deck babies is what I've been working with. I also thought this would be an excellent opportunity to update you about my monthly envelope readings. So I haven't really talked about this much since I set these up for 2025. And I just wanted to let you know how it's been going. So I do 2 a month. I have one for like the month overall. And then I have a second envelope that I've set up specifically for the full moons. And instead of writing the year on these, I just put the month and then the month and the full moon written down. And I didn't do the wax seals or anything, but then I added little sticky notes with the date and time of the full moon so that I knew when to pull, or like when to kind of get into this full moon envelope. But the month envelope, I kind of just get into at whatever point in the month feels right. And I got into this leading up to my Kickstarter launch. And so I thought I would share or remind you of the decks that I have been enjoying during this practice. But I have been using the Little Monsters Lenormand, and my reading for July was Sun, Scythe, and Monster. and this is monster 29. So this is the lady monster. That was my reading for July for any of you Lenormand people. And I felt as though there was this lead up to this big, my July felt like a lead up to a big event, which makes sense because not only is it my birthday month, but also of course with the Kickstarter launch. So I think this whole Sun Scythe lady situation is kind of like representing that build up, because as soon as like it hits sort of peak excitement for things that I'm working on, or in this case, like a birthday or a Kickstarter launch, it's almost like the day after there's like this really interesting kind of freeze, like time just sort of freezes a little bit. And it's partly an energy crash, I think, because I've been building, and then it kind of just like, whew, it kind of just like levels out really quick. And I think that's what this scythe after the sun, to me, represented in the month, is kind of just coming back to a place of more equilibrium. I also have been using this, oh gosh, what is this called? I'm so bad about this. I will try to put it on the screen for you, but it's a dictionary. It's like a definition. Oh, Diviner Definitions, I believe is what the deck is called. And my card for the month was healing, and it gives you all these different definitions. And so it's just like it's kind of gives you like a word of the month, which I really like. That's how I've been using it in my envelope readings. This has been a really cool practice for sure. And then I've been pulling like a light and shadow sort of combo. So I've been using my Mons Tarot. This is my original first edition, which is my personal baby. I only use it for reading for myself. But my Mons Tarot as sort of light, and I had King of Wands, which again makes sense with the project launch. And then I've been using the Deviant Moon Tarot, which is my go-to personal shadow work deck. And this is the Deviant Moon Borderless mass market version. And so these were my cards for July. I had King of Wands as the light, and then I had Strength as the shadow. And I think this, to me, this image is often a reminder not to overpower a situation or another person, not to feel like you need to like dominate or control. It's very much about like recognizing that strength can be soft and graceful and gentle. It doesn't have to be this big overpowering kind of energy. And then I also use the Wisdom of the Shadow and the Wisdom of the Divine Feminine. So this backing is the Wisdom of the Shadow, and I have Identity. And then this backing is Wisdom of the Divine Feminine, and I have Pleasure. And this, they almost look like they could connect, like the snakes that are coming off of our identity image almost look like they become the arms coming off of this pleasure image. And to me, this was like a reminder that I am not just, I don't have to perform. And I think sometimes I get really caught up in, I want to say like sort of people-pleasing energy, or feeling like I need to show up a particular way or not at all. And I think this for me was a reminder that I can just enjoy the moment. I don't have to worry about having to show up in a particular way. So this ended up being a really meaningful reading for me, as they usually are. And what I really like about these envelope readings, and what I think benefits me the most out of them, is being able to lay the cards down and just kind of consider what they mean. And so I'll put them on my table and I'll let them sit for a while, and then I'll often pick them up, and I always pick them up in an order where I can make sure, like for example, the Lenormand is where it mostly matters, that I remember the order. So first, second, third, face up, like that. But I'll scoop everything up and I'll put it back in the envelope, and I'll pull it out 2 or 3 times during the month and sit with it. And usually by the time I've done that, the third or even fourth time, I know what my overall things I need to process for the month are. So this is a really valuable practice. I obviously love working with these decks. And then in my full moon practice, I take a more spiritual bent. So I pull out, these are the decks I'm working with in my full moon. This is the Old Ways Tarot, I believe. That's the backing. And so I pull a tarot card just for like an overall theme, the sun. These are also tarot. But I pull that, and then I pull a tarot card from the Mysteries of the Black Madonna and the Mysteries of Mary. And again, I still have this kind of light and shadow energy carrying through. But with these, I read the entry from the guidebook in full. So this kind of is my full moon energy, which is interesting that it was the sun. And I had the sun obviously come up in the Lenormand reading for my month as well. And then each of these, so this is actually the 5 of Living Stone, just like the 5 of Earth or 5 of Pentacles. And then this is the 8 of Holy Rood, which, if I remember correctly, I unpacked this a week or 2 ago. Now I'm not going to remember. I'd have to check the book which suit that was. Again, I want to say it was Wands. I want to say it's Wands, but I can't remember off the top of my head. I'd have to double check. But I sit and I literally lay these out, and then I sit and read the full card entries, and I find that really, really beneficial as well. So these have been lovely to work with. They don't necessarily have this like aesthetic pairing, but my goal with the full moon reading is more to check in with how I'm doing spiritually and less with how I'm doing in like a mundane sense. So I found that really beneficial. And sometimes I'll journal about these readings and sometimes I won't, but it's continuing to like feed my soul throughout 2025, and I'm not bored with it or anything. I'm sure I will continue to do this practice next year as well, but I just love this. I love once a year sitting down and like drawing all these cards and putting them together like face down and just tucking away and not knowing what I get until the month I'm in. And it's really great. It's a great way to do for me to do things like month ahead, year ahead, is to work with these kinds of things. And just trust that the messages I get when I get them are what I was meant to hear at that period of time. Okay, and then I also did a reading for myself and for Dawn Michelle. We wrapped up a game. So if you don't know, Dawn Michelle and I play Baldur's Gate 3 over and over again. We role play games, we create characters, it's like a whole thing. And we had a game going on for a while called Wildflowers. And Wildflowers was a game that focused on two characters, Daphne, which was Dawn's character, and Alex, which was my character. Dawn's character was this like sweet, sort of naive, kind of like absolute pacifist character who gave this vibe of coming from a small town, and she was like super, she just loved everybody. She's a super darling character. And this deck is actually my Daphne deck. It it reminds me of that character. And so while we were playing this game, these decks actually lived out by my living room laptop where I do my gaming. And so the Flower Child Tarot represents Daphne. And then the deck that I have that represents Alex, Alex was a like sort of a street rat, sort of roguey character who was all about survival and the only thing that like didn't trust anybody, pretty cynical, that kind of thing. And so these two becoming friends, it was just like a whole sweet story we got to tell. And then they had their romance storylines as well with the other characters in the game. But punchline is, this is of the Holy Spectrum, the Infinity Edition, which I really love. And this was Alex's deck. It just gave those like, I don't know, kind of rough around the edges, more cynical vibe to me. I think it worked really, really well. And so at the end of our run, we were just kind of finishing up and kind of giving our characters their happy ever after moments and such. I did a reading, and oh my gosh, I wish I could remember. I know I sent Dawn a picture of it, so I might be able to grab it. I'm trying to remember if I pulled the Oracle card. This actual Magical Spirit Oracle is my pairing for this Flower Child Tarot. And I did pull an Oracle card at some point during that last game, but I don't remember if I took a picture of it or not. But this goes really well with this deck. I don't know if you can tell, but it's just a really, really great pairing. Anyway, I pulled for both of them, and oh, I'm gonna have to look because it was just so perfect. If you knew the characters, it would just be like extra perfect. Ah. Okay, I found it. I'll see if I can just show you a picture. So the cards I got, I know it's hard to tell on my phone, but I got the Ace of Cups. I got the Yin and Yang card from this deck, and then the King of Swords. So King of Swords for Alex, and she was very much the strategist of the two characters, which was so great. And Ace of Cups for Daphne was so perfect because she was she was just full of love and light and all that kind of stuff. And then the Yin and Yang card in here was so perfect because, of course, they were just such a balanced set of characters. It could not have been more perfect for a wrap-up card draw. Oh, there it is. Okay, there's the Yin and Yang card. So it says, I am in divine flow and move in alignment, but it says unity, balanced energy, and manifestation. And so for Alex and Daphne, it was such a sweet little wrap-up reading. And it's one of those moments I had in the month with cards that just felt so awesome that I wanted to share. But these are some great decks, and I do enjoy them. But yeah, this deck feels like Daphne now. Like when I want to tap into that particular kind of energy, this is going to be the deck. These are going to be the decks that I reach for. But this Magical Spirit Oracle is also one not to sleep on. It's quite lovely, and I do enjoy it. But yeah, these two go really, really well together. And Tarot of the Holy Spectrum has always been a really good reader for me from the first time I ever read with it. There's something about it that just works really well. And it's not at all a deck that I would say is like my typical style or anything. And it's got that dang bow, like this vertical bow. I don't know, as opposed to like the bow that goes like along this, like this way. It's this way. So when you shuffle, you kind of have to like push past some initial resistance because it's like, I don't know if you can see, it kind of catches. And there was a time where I really couldn't shuffle this because of my hand injury I got in January, but that's actually much better. Man, I am just babbling, y'all. We're just going to hang out. This is my energy today. We're just going to hang. We're going to chill. We're going to talk decks and stuff, but this was really fun. Oh, I got to put these back in their bags. I need a bag for Flower Child Tarot, but this bag is perfect for the Magical Spirit. And this literally reflective bag I've had for forever, since Peggy's early days making bags, is perfect for Magical Spectrum. So now I've got to find a bag for Flower Child to go with that. So here's what we're going to do next. We're going to have like a bit of a parade of pairings, and the pairings may make sense some of the time. They may not make sense other times, but these pairings all came about through the July tarot test drive with my badass unicorns. So for those who don't know, in my membership at the highest tier, once a month we get together and we have this like collaborative workshop style hangout live stream. And in that, I pick a theme. I either pick a specific deck or a type of decks, and we literally start to kind of figure out a way to work with those types of decks or that specific deck. And the idea is to sort of, I think my goal with it anyways, is to have a way for us to consider how to work with what we have, rather than like feel like we need to necessarily go get something new, to shift the thinking so that whether it's a grouping or a type of deck, or whether it is a specific one we have in our collection that just feels intimidating, but to figure out how to sort of get in and get into the guts of a deck and break it open and figure out how to work with it. So in July, our theme, or the group of decks we were trying to figure out, were fandom decks. So these are decks based on movies, TV, pop culture, stories that we're really familiar with, that kind of thing. And I really wanted to build a practice that we could go to these decks specifically for. And we ended up coming up with something so cool. But the result was I pulled out so many decks and we paired so many things. So I'm going to share with you some of those pairings, some of my favorites. I don't even know if I'll have them all here. I think I'll have most of them. And this was just about, like I said, different types of fandom decks that we can use and pairing them with different things and building a practice around it. So my members and I, when we were done, we had a very concrete like practice we can do with these types of decks. But again, I just have to show you these amazing pairings. So first of all, we have the Last Unicorn Tarot. This is a beloved deck of mine. It was my first Kickstarter I ever backed. That was tarot related specifically. I didn't even know how Kickstarter really worked, but I backed this. It took so long to come in and was so well worth the wait. But that one, during the tarot test drive, we paired it with this Enchanted Earth Oracle by Jessica LaHood. Oh my gosh. These two pair so beautifully. It was just an astounding bit of work. This isn't how we used it. I'm just showing you kind of what the pairing looks like. But if you know The Last Unicorn, I think you'll get why this sort of a pairing, this like magical ethereal forest, soft vibe, just worked so well with The Last Unicorn. And during these test drives, we don't just come up with a practice, but we test it, right? So I'll usually first do a reading for myself in whatever type of practice it is, and we'll kind of break it down. And then I'll do readings for other people using the same method. And then my members will pull out their decks and kind of play on their tables at the same time and sort of experiment. And so it's this really cool thing where we're not just like intellectualizing a thing to do, but actually doing it and seeing if it works the way we think it might work. Anyway, these were a really, really beautiful pairing. And then we also paired with the Last Unicorn Tarot, the Unicorn's Journey Tarot, which was a super great pairing. So I'll just show you how that looks as well. And I think with this, we typically had the fandom deck as like sort of the central focus. And there we go. Okay. And the funny thing is, this is such a beloved story to me. And it was funny because until this particular test drive, I had not paired these two decks together. And I don't know what that was about. I think partly, maybe I was scared to. Maybe I was scared to mesh these two worlds. But actually, I really love them together. And it does make me realize that the Unicorn's Journey Oracle, I guess I'll pull that out and just show you in a second, would really pair well as well with the Last Unicorn Tarot. And it's so funny because I struggled for a very long time, years, having this deck and just not thinking of anything I could pair it with. And it just hadn't occurred to me to pair my own deck with it, which is so funny because there's literally Last Unicorn quotes like in the guidebook for the Unicorn's Journey Tarot. Like, Yeah, here's a Peter S. Beagle Last Unicorn quote on these 2 pages in the intro to the Unicorn's Journey Tarot Guidebook. Just love it. Just loved it. So this was really fun, and getting to see how they played together was just a personal treat for me, I think, during that particular like live stream workshop thing. But just for giggles, I'll just grab my quick little make playing cards test of the UJO, just so you can see how that would go roughly, just to give you an idea. Visually, it actually really works, and I did not know that it would, but it totally does. Like boundaries with temperance, boundaries and depletion on either side of temperance is like, oof. Anyway, they do play very, very well together. Super fun. I don't think I had my UJO test in when we did this particular test drive, but anyways, I love this deck, and it was really fun to play with it with the different pairings for sure. Okay, we also played with the Wizard of Oz Tarot, and I think one of these pairings might make more sense than the other, just for general sharing. In the practice, they both made perfect sense. But this is the Wizard of Oz Tarot by... Why is the author name not like really prominent on here? Oh, here we go. This is written by Erica Davis and illustrated by David. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, y'all. It's David with an E, Ortley. And this was the first one we pulled out actually during our practice experimentation. And it was such a perfect one to work with for this, but I'm trying to pull out some different cards. I'll show you the 2 different pairings we ended up putting with this one. Again, some will make sense, some won't. And I don't want to like blow all the badass unicorn secrets up in here, but the first one we paired it with, believe it or not, was actually the fountain. Not the fountain. Yeah, the fountain. Oh my gosh. I used to call this one the Spacious Tarot all the time because I'd get the 2 mixed up. I don't know why I did that, but I definitely did that. So that was one pairing. And visually, it probably doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But again, it made sense because we weren't pairing based on visuals. We were pairing, it was more of an energy pairing. And then we also paired the Disney Villains, which granted, the Disney Villains Tarot is a fandom deck kind of all its own, but it ended up actually working out really, really, really well. Obviously, from an illustration standpoint, like these are both Inside Editions decks. These 2 do work really well together. And you wouldn't necessarily think so, but they definitely do. And I think in this case, the pippish nature of this one played off of the much more scenic Wizard of Oz Tarot super well. And I really liked that. The Fountain Tarot did exactly what it was meant to do in the practice, but it's not necessarily a pairing I'd immediately go, okay, yeah, I'm going to pair Wizard of Oz with the Fountain Tarot. I don't think I would normally, but for a specific reason, it did end up working really well in here. But I would say if you're looking for a good pairing for Wizard of Oz, maybe take a peek at Villains or take a peek at something that has this kind of maybe art style or something that's a little more pippish. You might find that it pairs quite nicely with Wizard of Oz. I love this deck so much. It was the first deck I ever had that had this magnetic open up all the way box, and I fell in love with this style. This was the box. This was the deck that did it. So if you're ever curious why I do my deck boxes this way with a full open out, it's because of the Fountain Tarot. It was my first magnetic wraparound box, and I was obsessed. I love it. We also pulled out the Buffy the Vampire Slayer Tarot. I really need to see about reaching out to Inside Editions to see if you can get the standard edition with the updated artwork. But anyways, this was a great fandom one to play with. We paired this, I know it's probably going to be a huge shock, but it worked really well with the Tarot Vampires. It hadn't occurred to me, actually, like even like I feel like the backs kind of coordinate really well. But Buffy the Vampire Slayer with a deck all about vampires, I mean, it couldn't be more perfect. And I think even just the fact that these vampires are like that 90s like aesthetic, it was a really, really fun pairing. And I think something else that really stands out to me about the practice that I did with my Badass Unicorns in July with this, with the fandom deck situation, is that I was quicker to reach for tarot to pair with tarot. And that is something that I don't often do. And in fairness, I saw this discussion somewhere recently. It might have been in the Supportive Tarot Facebook group. But pairing decks is not something like you should feel like you ever have to do, ever. If it adds something to the practice for you, great. If it clarifies things, great. If it gives you more context, great. But this is not like the right way to read tarot, just so I've said that, because I think sometimes something just takes hold and it becomes something that a lot of us are talking about or we're doing or whatever. I find it really helps me to expand a conversation I'm having with my cards, but it is never, ever, ever something that you should ever feel like you're doing it wrong if you're not pairing. Like, You don't have to pair. But anyways, in my brain, when I paired, I always thought tarot plus oracle. And one thing that I really got out of this whole fandom play I did with my members was it became really sensible and useful to me to pair tarot with tarot. It really broke open the reading for me in a different way. And I really enjoyed pairing these. And this is definitely a pairing I'd walk away from and go, you know what? I think I would pair these again outside of even the specific practice that we did in the membership. Now this deck, the Tarot Vampires, this is the Ian Daniels one. I believe this one is now technically out of print. It hasn't been out of print for a terribly, terribly long time, so you might still be able to pretty easily snag a copy somewhere. We did a whole Unicorn Fam deck study of this deck some time ago, and it was really, really a good study. I definitely enjoyed it. But I love my Buffy deck. I know the stories or the episodes really well, the characters really well, and so this was a really fun pairing to play with. Ooh. Now we did also pair Buffy with a different deck combo or deck family, which I'll show you really quick before I forget. We also played around with pairing, let me pull out some different cards. We also played around with pairing the Buffy Tarot with the Unfolding Path and the When My Soul Whispered. So let me just show you what that looks like. So this is the Unfolding Path. Now this was the indie version of the deck. And it's this deck is now available mass market, this Unfolding Path. It's really beautiful. It's just a really great little modern deck. Super awesome. And then paired that, or like added this When My Soul Whispered. I tend to keep When My Soul Whispered and Unfolding Path together, like in a, I don't know, like in a little perma pair. And I just found that these all actually worked super well together. I don't know that, I would have originally thought of them. I could also see this particular combination going really well with the World of Warcraft tarot, which also has these more softer tones. In fact, let me just grab that real quick just for fun since we're hanging out. I didn't end up actually pulling this deck during our fandom hangout, but this is another Insight Editions. This is more of a deck I got for nostalgia, but I have not really worked with much, and I really should pull it out more. Ooh! Okay, sorry. I'm having a whole moment because I feel like these all go really nicely together. What the heck, man? Look at those. Those look beautiful on the table together. Those look beautiful on the table together. I really like that. You know, I have not played with this deck much at all, but it's, again, one that I just really enjoy. Peggy and I used to play a lot of World of Warcraft together, and I really like it. So there's that one. But yeah, this Unfolding Path with its sort of soft watercolor and white space. I don't know, there's something about this watercolor background and then these characters that are like illustrated over top. I really like it. So that is the Unfolding Path, and this is When My Soul Whispered. Now this is the original indie version of the deck, but these are both now available mass market, which is pretty great. So love both of these so much. And that was kind of a fun pairing to play with. I'll save my favorite pairing for last. But then we also pulled out the Game of Thrones tarot, which is just, this was my first fandom deck, and it spoiled me for all the rest of them because it's so well done. And I don't know what the production quality is like these days, but this was my first ever linen deck. I didn't understand what this was. I was like, why does it whistle when you shuffle it? I don't know, like, I had never seen a texture like that on cards before, and they don't, as far as I know, this deck is no longer available in linen. I believe the current version is a smooth cardstock, and I would guess something a little bit more, I don't know, like affordable. I don't know if this is black core. I'm gonna check. No, this is totally not black core. It is just a linen finished cardstock. Anyway, so this is Game of Thrones. Love this deck. But this has a very specific vibe, and so when we pulled this out for a fandom deck play, we were trying to think of like a good pairing for it, and we ended up playing with it with the Fyodor Pavlov, which made just an incredible pair for it. Like, look at the tones. Like, this was such a great pairing. It worked really, really super well. Like, even look at the coins. Look at all the coins together. Even those kind of, they match. This definitely maintains similar feels. And because this is so rich in color and so, I want to say like more dark, and this has all of these parchmenty tones in the background, these two just coordinated so beautifully together. They worked really, really well. And I loved it. I loved reading with these together. So this was a really fun pairing. I would 100% pair these two again in the future as well. But the Fyodor Pavlov is such a gorgeous deck. I love this deck so much. So any excuse. Oh, wait, I got to keep this out because I got to show you the third thing we added. So we also ended up pulling in the deck of emblems. Now, I do not know in any official capacity what the situation is with Liminal 11. Now, this is a Fez Inkwright little bonus deck that came when, okay, so the story is, Fez Inkwright's deck, Seed and Sickle, when Inside Editions did a special limited edition like box for that deck, there was a little deck inside called the Citadel deck. And then later, there was such a clamoring for the Citadel that they later came out with the Citadel as its own deck. And then they did a special edition for the Citadel deck, and in that was this exclusive little deck, the deck of emblems. So that's how I got this. It came in a special edition box. But there's weird things with Inside Editions. I don't know what the story is right now. I just know that they don't see, their stuff does not seem to be like available. Like there's some things that are still available, but nothing on their website seems to be happening. I don't know the story. I don't know the story and I don't want to speak on it because I don't know the story. But I apologize because I don't think you can easily get this little deck. But it did do such a great job with Game of Thrones. And I imagine Citadel would go really, really well with Game of Thrones as well. The only thing that throws me a little bit is the white, when these two like have that kind of parchmenty tone and then you have this like bright white. But the mechanics of this deck, the way this deck works and how, like for example, you get the key and it will literally tell you in the book, in a reading, the key can unlock meanings you may not have thought of before. The card preceding it is only the surface. Draw more cards to find out what's underneath. So if this is just at the surface, you would then draw to see what's underneath, right? Like, so you'd be like, oh, what else is going on with the Page of Coins? He's got the Four of Coins going on, right? I know it's out of frame a bit, but you get the idea. So there's like mechanics, if that makes sense. So when you pull these deck of emblems cards, the guidebook gives little things like, in a reading, this card will reveal a grounding influence. Pay attention to where it lands. The knot may also tie two cards together, implying they are connected in ways you may not have realized. So there's like little like mechanics in how it interacts with other cards that just makes it really innovative and fun to work with. So I've used it a bunch for different reasons, but it really did work well in this little grouping. And then our last pairing was definitely my favorite. So I will pull that one out next. I don't want to lose track of what goes with what here. So Game of Thrones goes in its Game of Thrones bag. Deck of Emblems goes in this black and red bag. And then we have Fyodor Pavlov. So my favorite pairing actually ended up being this one. So we pulled out the Alice Tarot. This is the Baba Studios Alice, which is arguably my favorite of all the Alice decks, although I really do like the Llewellyn Barbara Moore Alice in Tarotland, I think it's called, or Tarot in Wonderland, one of those. Anyway, so we pulled the Alice Tarot in, and the deck that we ended up pulling to accompany it it ended up being such a cool pairing, and it is the Tyldwick Tarot. Now this is the first edition, first indie edition. So the finish is a little different. The coloring's a little different than later editions that came out. But this ended up being so perfect. Something about the Tyldwick with Alice, art-wise and like visually, but also energetically, it ended up going really, really well. And it kind of makes sense to me. You've got a lot of these like wallpapery environments in the Alice Tarot. You have that, of course, happening in the Tyldwick. There's also this sort of like mystery and opulence to the Tyldwick that also plays in really well with the Alice, this specific version of the Alice Tarot, this Baba Studios Alice Tarot. And it just, I think because Tyldwick feels like you're sort of wandering through a like abandoned kind of quirky space, like a mansion. And then you have the Alice Tarot, which also has that sort of wandering energy to it. I don't know, it just really, really worked well. If you've never considered or found a good pairing for the Alice Tarot, this might be one to experiment with because it did read really beautifully, but it also just sort of matched its vibe or matched its energy. I don't know how else to describe that, but that is the Tyldwick with the Baba Studios Alice, and this one is out of print, but I think I heard a rumor that they were doing one more print of Alice. I know that Baba Studios is going to be getting out of the tarot producing world, but I believe they did have one more reprint of Alice planned. And this is my favorite of all of the Baba Studios decks, I would say. So loved that pairing. That was super, super fun. This was actually the Unicorn Fam study deck for June and July, the Witch's Wisdom Tarot by Phyllis Curott. I worked with this, but I mostly just studied this. And I have to say that going through the study, as happens sometimes when I get to the end of it, I realize that a deck has run its course for me. And while I'm not 1000% set on that at this point, I'm going to visit it again when I get to this part of my collection series and see if it goes on the chopping block, but I think it's going to. I think this is just one of those decks that held a special place for me, partly because I had such an attachment to this author, Phyllis Curott's book, The Book of Shadows, which was so significant in my own spiritual journey and my own like discovery of myself and all the things. I have marked this book up like crazy though. It is totally marked up, but I went through the study. I really dove deep into it. I really had a completely different expectation for how it was going to go. But I think what I recognized is that this is absolutely beautiful and it has so much wisdom in it. But trying to use this as a tarot ultimately didn't end up working for me, but it did in the past. And I think that's what really threw me, is that when I first got this deck in and was working with it a bunch, I'm pretty sure I spent a full month with it, and I had just the most incredible time. Had all these really great readings, and it just functioned so perfectly for me, but it's not speaking to me at all right now. And I don't know if that's temporary or not, but it feels now like something that is past. And I don't know if you've ever had that happen with a deck where you get into it or you pull it out after a long absence and you're like, oh, this isn't me anymore. Mine's actually in order from the study still. But by the time I got through it, even the majors, the majors of this deck go in opposite directions. So you actually begin in the world card, and the world is on fire. And the idea is like slowly unpacking and like actually shedding layers and becoming more and more true to yourself until you end up here, light and free, like the Pilgrim or the Fool. And it's a really beautiful story, and one that I think meets us oftentimes later in life and is really meaningful and makes so much sense. And there's a lot here that I really appreciated, especially when I first got this deck. I think I have some ideas about why this maybe doesn't function for me the way that I thought it was going to, or the way that it used to. And I'm hoping to unpack a lot of those. At the time I'm filming this, I haven't yet had my wrap up with my members about the study. And I'm hoping to kind of like be able to suss out some of the more specific reasons why I feel like this isn't for me anymore in that chat. And maybe I'll change my mind by the end of it. And if I do, I'll definitely be circling back. And I will be covering this deck in my deck collection when I get to my wisdom decks. But in the meantime, I'm just letting it rest for a minute because I don't know. It didn't go where I thought it was going to go, is the punchline. But I did spend an awful lot of time with this in June and July, and I did want to report back. The last thing I have to share with you before I get into all the like faith and spirituality related stuff is this book. This is You Better Be Lightning by Andrea Gibson. This is a poetry book, which I actually bought some time ago. I had been following Andrea on social media, like on Instagram, for 2 or 3 years, I feel like. Maybe not that long. It feels like it's been a long time, but maybe not. I don't know how I first got recommended their content, but when the very first time I saw a post of theirs, I was obsessed. I was like, I need your words in my feed. And I would always click, I would always stop whenever I saw Andrea in my feed. They were often making little video posts, like little Instagram video posts, and they would be reading their poetry or saying a poem, speaking a poem, or they would be just speaking, but the way that they spoke was always poetic. And I think in hindsight, they were also poems, but Andrea's way of putting words together and of speaking power into vulnerable experiences was really astounding. And if you don't already know, I shared this on my stories, but Andrea passed away on July 15th. And I've never had the death of a person I followed on social media but didn't know personally impact me the way Andrea Gibson's passing impacted me. And I think it's because Andrea is one of those people that just had such a profound impact on the world and on me personally. I really felt like their words were really powerful and spoke into things in a way that I hadn't seen before, hadn't experienced before. And I was so moved by their work that I bought their poetry book, again, some time ago. But in July, when I heard of their passing, I was so sad. I was so sad. If you didn't know, Andrea Gibson had terminal ovarian cancer. And there was something about the way that Andrea cracked wide open, not in spite of their diagnosis, but because of it. And like the way in which they shared all the ways they saw joy and beauty and just incredibleness everywhere, that was awe-inspiring to me. And if you read now the posts by their partner, who's continuing their Substack and continuing to post on social media, and in fact just released a poem that Andrea had written and recorded a YouTube video for before their passing, but didn't want to share with the world because it felt like it might scare people. It was about death. And their partner just released that poem on YouTube. You can look up Andrea Gibson on YouTube. I'll try to link that actual poem, but it's just trigger warning. Andrea's stuff has always been very raw and very emotional. I don't know how to describe it. Touch is a very emotional place. But also I think Andrea had this power to make people feel seen and to make me feel seen even in difficulty. It's really hard to describe. I would just really recommend reading their work. But really powerful stuff. So sort of the moment I found out that they had passed, I just picked this off my shelf and just read it cover to cover. And that's all I read for like the last little bit of July, was just poem after poem after poem after poem. And I tend to be really moved by poetry books. I have several special ones in my collection, and they're things that I revisit again and again and again. And I'm so glad I have this. There's another book, it's just difficult to get right now because of their passing, I assume, that has a bunch of their sayings and quotes. But I would be shocked, I think, to find out that you had never encountered their words anywhere. They're so shareable. So the algorithm just did me right for once. When Andrea passed, my feed was just flooded with all things Andrea, and it's still to some degree flooded with all things Andrea, and I'm so grateful for it because it's been really beautiful to revisit so many of their words. But really, really beautiful stuff. And again, if you've never checked out Andrea's work, highly recommend. But there's some beautiful things out there, and this is one of them. Lots of recorded pieces. Andrea did a lot of touring for a long time. There's a piece that was recorded about the Pulse nightclub that Andrea recorded with Mary Lambert playing in the background. It's just, you can find so many incredible things about their work on YouTube. It's just highly recommend. Okay, so that concludes our like regular section of the monthly deck reviews. The next thing is going to be some decks that I work with specific to my spiritual path, and then I'm going to get into a few books specific to that as well. So again, if that's not your cup of tea, you can like peace out, no harm, no foul, and thank you so much for hanging out with me. For those of you interested in the topics that I tend to cover when I'm speaking about my spiritual path, specifically this whole like faith and spirituality, like faith and mystery and magic stuff, like I talked about in my live stream, then hang out with me here. Okay. That said, there's a few decks. Now, I wasn't doing my bedtime card pulls almost all through July, mostly because by the time I get into bed, I'm just crashing. And that's pretty normal because I'm in like a creative upswing of energy, so I'm just more tired when I go to bed. But I wanted to kind of touch base again with the decks that I tend to use on Sunday mornings. So Sunday mornings, I tend to pull a card from each of these decks, and it always seems to harmonize with whatever reading I'm doing, whether it's Bible study stuff or whether it's whatever it is. It always seems to harmonize like perfectly. And these two decks seem to balance that work for me really beautifully. First, I've spoken about this before. This is Tarot of Her. I pull one card from this every single Sunday, and it's always so great. My deck is, as you can see, starting to, I'm not gonna be able to see actually, it's starting to warp a little because I just am constantly in this, shuffling this. This one, I think, is still temporarily out of print. As far as I know, they're planning a reprint of it. It is a round deck. This was sort of my solution to the desire to have a deck kind of like the, oh my gosh, y'all, my brain is just like going kaput. The classic 70s round, like very feminine centric deck. Mother Piece. This is my solution to the Mother Piece. I think, to me, this is kind of like a modern day reimagining of that kind of thing. Tarot of Her is very focused on Mother Earth, and it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Anyways, let me just show you some cards while I chat about it. But anyways, I find that every Sunday I'll pull a card from this to represent that divine feminine energy. And I really love the way that it takes me into that place. I love the way the suits are imagined. I love the artwork. I love the shape. Everything about this feels like tapping into Mama Earth energy, and I love that. There's never been another deck that has felt to me as Mama Earth as this deck feels. The keywords on the cards are great. The art is great. But I also really love working with the guidebook. So I'll pull a single card and I'll get into the guidebook. And one of my favorite parts of every single card, like here, for example, we have the 10 of Leaves. This is going to be the 10 of Swords. And there's this little bit right under here that is always just so beautiful. So for example, this says, a new day will always dawn. And there's a reflection question. Can you find hope in this turning point? And it always feels like something that when I sit with it on Sunday mornings and I think about that reflection question and I think about the artwork and I think about what card this is in the tarot and what that means. And when I read through this entry, and often I'll take little quotables from this side too, and I'll write them in my journal. But I always sit with this and I always walk away feeling very much like this has been so synchronistic and completely on point with whatever it is I am thinking about or contemplating spiritually that day. And it's just, oh, it's chef's kiss. It's so wonderful. And I have not yet felt the need or the desire to change this part of the practice. And I would say this is the anchor of my Sunday card pull practice right now. And I really, really love it. And then I added this to it. So this is the Tarot of Light. I've had this deck forever. This is actually my second version of this deck. And I'm sure I talked about this in other monthly deck reviews, but this one has this really soft energy that does not feel gendered. It doesn't feel like divine feminine or divine masculine or whatever. It just is. It just feels spiritual in nature. It does have some angelic imagery in it, which is really nice, but it doesn't feel... There's nothing about this that feels like it takes me down a path. Oh, I should show you this one. So I pulled this one Sunday morning and I ended up doing an exercise I've got to find it here in my little, here it is. So let me just cover up this other thing. Maybe I can do it this way here. Let me do it this way. There. So I actually I pulled the card and I literally basically painted. So I tried to paint, let me show you the image and you can see what I did here. So this is the image and I got out my watercolor paints and I kind of tried to recreate some of the shapes and the feeling of this. And then I had taken a picture of my card draw and I pasted it over the top. So I did this in my little junk journal. This is actually the journal that I've been filling for Danny Mystic's Fill Your Journal series. And I don't know if that's probably the coolest page I've done recently. Was painting it. Anyway, that was a fun exercise. I did that one Sunday morning. But anyways, really, really and this has a lot of the same stuff, by the way, in the guidebook where there is I wouldn't say it's a reflection question, but there's this little quotey bit up here in the card entries that's in italics, and I'll tend to write that in my journal along with my card pull. And again, this card, whatever card I've pulled from this deck and whatever card I've pulled from the Tarot of Her, for some reason they seem to like harmonize really beautifully and speak to each other. And so I like sitting with both. So I do both, one from each, pretty much every Sunday without fail. And I just really love that as part of my ongoing practice. So that's really nice. I guess I'll scooch that there for now. Okay, now we're getting into it. We're getting into it. Okay. So a few things that I've been really, really enjoying when it comes to my sort of Bible study stuff, reading about all of that. I finished 3 books in July on my Kindle. So I'm going to try to pull up their covers if I can remind myself how the heck to do that. Okay, you know what? I'll just put it on the screen because it's going to be way faster than trying to pull it up on my Kindle. So the first book that I finished in July connected to all this stuff is The Path of the Christian Witch. I can't read the author name. I'll put a picture of the cover up on the screen for you so you can see it. But this is like memoir style writing about somebody's journey to sort of melding those two worlds for herself. She very much was sort of walking this line, I would say, between a Christian upbringing and exploring sort of Wicca and witchcraft and what that looked like. And her journey, I think, is very personal, but she talks about what it was like for her to, I guess, find the way to harmonize those. It was enjoyable to read. It didn't feel like practical application stuff so much as it felt like seeing how one person might have reconciled those two worlds. I thought that was really, really interesting. I also finished a book called How the Bible Actually Works by Peter Enns. Pete Enns is one of the hosts of the Bible for Normal People podcast. It is a podcast I really, really enjoy. And it's a scholarly podcast that is expansive in its thinking. They interview really, really great other scholars and other authors and people who bring that kind of grounded, being willing to wrestle with the text, being willing to question what they read, that kind of thing. It's a non-dogmatic approach to these topics. And I really appreciate the podcast. So I really appreciate Pete's style. And the book, How the Bible Actually Works, and the subtitle is, in which I explain how an ancient, ambiguous, and diverse book leads us to wisdom rather than answers, and why that's great news. So that's the subtitle of the book. It's very long. But I actually started that book several months ago and finally finished it in July, and that was a really worthwhile read. And then I also read a book by another scholar whose work I really enjoy, Marcus J. Borg, and his book that I read was The God We Never Knew. Also really, really good. The God We Never Knew really takes a more expansive, again, imaginative approach to the concept of God and what that looks like. And I found that really, really good. Highlighted the heck out of it, added notes, like it was a whole thing. So really enjoyed that. And Marcus J. Borg was the first scholar whose work I read when I was first dipping my toe into all of this stuff. And the book that I have been reading and working with, I talked about during my Faith and Spirituality live stream, but it's this one called Reading the Bible Again for the First Time by Marcus J. Borg. Now this one I haven't read cover to cover. I'm actually about that far in because it's sort of segmented into different sections of the Bible. So for example, there's sections in here about origin stories, which is like the Pentateuch. Yeah, so foundations. Let's see. Yeah, reading the creation stories again, reading the Pentateuch again, which is the first 5 books, reading the prophets again, reading wisdom books again, reading the Gospels again, reading Paul again, reading Revelations again. So I've been working my way through this book slowly as I've been working my way through the actual Bible. So for example, when I read Proverbs, I went through the Proverbs section. When I read Job, I went through the Job section and read a bunch of that. And so I've been kind of skipping around in here based on where I'm at in my actual study and like reading. And this literally, the subtitle of this is Taking the Bible Seriously, but Not Literally. I really like Marcus J. Borg's approach and really, really good stuff. So when I saw the book, The God We Never Knew, also by this author, I picked it up and I read that one cover to cover because it wasn't specific to certain parts of the text. And I loved it. It was so good. I will say I still recommend Richard Rohr's The Universal Christ as one of the main ones to go to if you're interested in any of this stuff and want to think about it more imaginatively and more expansively. But I've definitely found myself gravitating towards the work of people who are not looking at the Bible as this inerrant literal text, but rather as a source of beauty and truth and wisdom that is more expansive and imaginative in its application. Hopefully some of that made sense. And again, if you have no idea what I'm talking about any of this, before you freak out, no, not going all Dorian Virtue, I promise. But also, you would probably want to watch my live stream where I talk about faith, magic, and mystery and charting my spiritual path, because that's what this is all connected to. So, something else that I have been really, 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 really enjoying is this book. This is actually a children's book called God's Stories as Told by God's Children, brought to you by the Bible for Normal People. So again, this is by, or was created by the Bible for Normal People podcast people. So Pete Enns. But what's really great is each story is written by a different Bible scholar, and they're all listed here. I think this is them. Is this them on the back? Or are these Kickstarter back? This was a Kickstarter thing initially. Yeah, featuring contributions from over 50 leading biblical scholars, theologians, faith practitioners, and storytellers. This introduces children to many conversations we find within the Bible and invites kids to add their own voices. The interesting thing about this, yeah, finally a children's Bible that takes its scholarship as seriously as its storytelling. Something that's so great about this, and I've been reading these stories along with whatever section of the Bible I happen to be in, is that this does not shy away from the weird things and the hard things and the confusing things and the contradictory things. And I think that's really, really, it's really well done in that way. It talks about the many different voices in the Bible, but this is my favorite thing. And I've actually been writing in it and highlighting because of the way that this has been put together. So actually the very first story in here is called In the Beginning. And this is actually told by Renee August. And so each of these stories is contributed to by a different scholar. Like this is the one by Dan McClellan, who I've spoken about as well in that live stream I did. But this very first book, you normally expect to see Genesis in the beginning. But instead, in this particular children's collection, it starts with the story of the Assyrian exile. Or excuse me, the Babylonian exile. And it literally says the one that begins where you least expect. And I wrote here, the beginning of the Bible was the Babylonian exile, #facts. This is literally what I wrote in this. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that a lot of the stories were all oral tradition. They were all stories that were told until such time as the people who did the writing of the different books of the Bible were in exile. So a lot of the literature was written through the lens of a people that were in exile. And when you start to explore biblical scholarship, if you go down this like really nerdy rabbit hole that I've been going down, you start to find out that the way these stories are framed and the way they're told is filtered through an experience that they're having, is colored by an experience that they're having. So anyway, I have a bunch of notes, scholarship and oral tradition. And they talk about this. They're not like, it's not condescending to children, which is really great. And there's like, here's what I highlighted. Within the Torah, we find laws, stories, songs, poems, lists of people and families, myths, and many other ancient ways of storytelling. All of these genres, these ways of storytelling are needed to teach people. In other words, the stuff in the Bible can have value, particularly when you recognize that there's reasons for telling it in that way. It's been really, really cool to read this and to see how refreshingly real it is, even down to pointing out things that are problematic and things that are weird. Like, hey, that's not cool, man. Like that's not good. Just some really neat bits. So as I've been going through, I'm not reading ahead of where I'm at, if that makes sense. I'm in the prophets now, so I haven't actually read any of the prophets sections, but they're literally sort of sectioned out like that. Something else that I think is pretty great about this is there's actually a story here from 2nd Maccabees, which is actually apocrypha. It's an apocryphal book of the Bible, which is interesting. It does show up in Catholic Bibles, I believe. But anyway, I just had to highlight this because I have really enjoyed reading these sort of like lighter, geared towards a younger audience version of some of these stories, but with an eye to scholarship, with like a respect for the scholarship, and not just repeating random dogma things. So that's been really nice. And I feel like, again, I'm down the rabbit hole with all this stuff and I've been really enjoying it, but they do have a version of this that is either coming out or is already out, which is literally for adults. I don't see the need. Apparently with the adults, it doesn't have these like these little let's talk call outs that invite you to ask questions. There's some things that are here specifically for kids, but like the text is apparently the same in the adult version. I like the kid version. I'm glad I have the kid version. And then something else I got, oh my gosh, in July. This thing is a beast. Look at this. Look at how massive this is. This is Eerdmans' commentary on the Bible. This is fabulous. If, again, you're digging into things or interested in digging into things to the degree I am, which, again, I'm sure there's like 2 of you watching this that might be, if that. But this is, how many pages is this? 1,600 and some odd. We're in the index now. But this has been, this is not an easy read, but this has been really fabulous to pull out when I'm in different sections if I have questions or if I want to know what the scholarly consensus or take is on different things that are happening or being said. This is really, really useful. This talks about interpretive strategies. This is something else. When I found this, I was really excited because it has some of the pseudepigraphal books, like First Enoch, in here. I don't know that there's a lot of that in here. I know First Enoch is in here, and I think there's a reason. I know there's a reason why that's relevant. But I've read First Enoch and studied it a bit. Yeah, so there's pseudepigrapha. They have First Enoch, and then they have the Hebrew Bible and the Dead Sea Scrolls as a whole section. They also have Old Testament Apocrypha. So they break down Tobit, Judith, Greek Esther, Wisdom of Solomon, Sirach, Baruch, additions to Daniel, Maccabees 1 and 2, Esdras, Prayer of Manasseh, Psalm 151, 3 Maccabees, 3 Esdras, or 2 Esdras, 4 Maccabees. That's not something you see in most biblical commentaries, especially a commentary that's one volume like this. Now, this, again, is massive. But whenever I hit a section of text that I want to understand more or I want to get more feedback on, this has been really, really, really good. And this feels very, like, I don't know how else to describe it besides neutral. It doesn't lean in any particular theological direction that I can tell. It's, again, very non-dogmatic, but it's like, this is why scholars think this, and this is how this gets interpreted. And I think one of the things that's kind of interesting is about getting into the scholarship side of all of this is that I found that I kept finding these videos and stuff talking about how people who have a very particular dogmatic religious view go to seminary where they learn a lot of these things about the scholarship, and it literally wrecks their faith. It wrecks their religion, because if your religion is based on dogma and it can't hold up to archaeology and the things that are learned about and uncovered as more and more texts come up and we get better at translating things, if your faith, if your religion can't survive that, then it's based on the wrong things, in my view, in my personal view. And this stuff actually takes me deeper into the mystery and deeper into the magic of it all, because I see how much richness there is to uncover when you're not tied to looking at it in only one particular way. And it gets very exciting for me from an intellectual standpoint. So a lot of this to me is is intellectual, but a lot of it is also very spiritual. And it's been a really, really beautiful exploration for me to understand it and to dig deeper and to be able to ask the hard questions and find answers is such a gratifying experience. But anyways, I'm still working my way through. And to that degree, I did pick something up. And if you all ever want to see like a collection video, because I now have kind of an alarming number of study Bibles and resources, but this is one of my favorite things. And I did get this in July. I think it was July, early July. This is called the Lectio Bible. I don't show a lot of this kind of thing on the channel. Again, I would probably want to do that separately or do that in some sort of thing. But this has been really great for straight reading. So I have tons of study resources. As you just saw, I have massive commentary. I have study Bibles with tons and tons of notes and cultural context and cultural background notes and maps and photos and archaeology and blah, 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 blah. But also in the process of just trying to get into the story, like what's happening, this has been such a great thing. So this is actually it's the NIV version, actually. And when I just want to do some straight reading, this is really great because the way this is formatted is literally like you're reading a hardback, like a novel. There's 2 bookmarks built in, but it's all single column. There's no study notes. There's no cross references. There's no gunk down at the bottom. There's also no chapter headings or verse headings. So when you're reading, you're just going through, this is probably a bad example because that's the book of Job, but Psalms has headings because they're numbered. But let me just go into like a regular section. So yeah, here's the book of Joshua. So like you're going through, the only way you even know what verses you're in is down at the very, very bottom. There's like a little verse reference here. And any translation notes or things like that actually show up at the end of the book as endnotes. So it doesn't clutter up the reading. So if you just want to like read and for it not to feel the way I guess like reading into this kind of thing can feel, then this format works really well. I actually have another version that does this similarly, but also has Gustave Doré illustrations throughout, and that's really beautiful. But lately when I'm just trying to do a chunk of reading, because I am now currently in my study right about here. Actually, I'm almost exactly here. I'm in the middle of the book of Isaiah at the moment. So this is about how much I've already covered. And I have actually read some of the books that are ahead of here too. Like I don't think I've read Jeremiah yet. No, I've read some of the other prophets though. Micah, I've read Micah. I'm reading sort of chronologically, so it has me skipping around sometimes. But anyway, punchline is, when I'm just like reading, this has been so great. It's distraction free, and I can actually get quite a bit of reading done in one chunk. And then I kind of go back and then I read study notes. And then when I encounter something that's like, whoa, problematic or like really weird, then I'll dig into commentaries or I'll go into study resources and I get in deeper. And that's really fun. But when I just want to like straight read, this has been such a lovely experience. It doesn't feel super massive either. It's like a nice size. I don't know if you can tell, but like here's a Oracle card. Like, it's not huge, right? Especially compared to like that big Bible commentary I just showed you, but Yeah, anyway. So this, I thought I would show this because I thought this was really nice as far as just, again, straight reading. But I will say I would not have jumped into the NIV translation when I first began. As I mentioned in my live stream, I was only working with the NRSV, the New Revised Standard Version, the updated edition, because it is, in my view, the least dogmatic, the most inclusive version. So I can read this now because I know how to filter for that kind of thing, and I already know what some of those things are. And if I hit a phrase that, or a passage that feels like the translation might lean a little one way or another, I'll just grab my main one and my main NRSV UE and check it there. I'll pull it up on my phone. But anyway, yeah, babble. Okay, that's it. So thank you so much if you stuck through this section as well. For those of you interested, I really am only putting this here because I know there's a few of you who have been looking for an update on how all of that is going. That's how it's going. It's still very much the same. I'm still studying. I'm still digging in. I've still got like little daily practices and weekly practices connected to all of that. The only deck I didn't talk about, because I don't really have a defined practice around it, but I am using it, is this Illuminated Deck of Holy Souls by Lindsay D. Amore Williams. This is really beautiful, and I just, every once in a while, it's such a beautiful deck, production value wise too. I absolutely love it, and I love the colors. But every once in a while, I just kind of keep this out, and every once in a while, I'll just wander through, and I'll just pull a saint. I struggle a little bit with the font, the small font on these cards. It's real small, but this is Saint Maurice, and it says, "Warrior of faith, grant me the courage to face life's battles with a heart devoted to justice and compassion." And I find these little mantras and these little sayings under here, these little requests or prayers, to be really beautiful. So I'll pull one every now and again and just kind of sit with that. And it always seems to be on point. This is such a special little deck. I think you can still scoop this up, but I think time may be running out on it. I'm not entirely sure what the story is there, but if you're curious, I would definitely go find Lindsay D. Williams on socials, track it down. But I'm really glad I picked this up. I do enjoy pulling a card from this now and again. Okay, that's it. So thank you so much for hanging out. And for those of you who either watch the whole thing or watch just the first chunk, if you happen to pop back in for the end, thank you for popping back in for the end. I appreciate you all so, so much. And until next time, may your magic always shine from the inside out. Bye.